rethinking social Central Asian security, you can't discuss with a given topic. So I'm half discussed and half just wanted to offer a few points. Yashar's presentation was very nice because obviously it's very comprehensive, and almost anything you say can also speak to Yashar's presentation. And then to Shutai's presentation as well. Rather similar, but on the Balkan situation. But let me step back a bit and offer a few points. First of all, when talking about the Central Asian region, I think, especially from outside, if there is any quick takes or terms that get associated with Central Asia, it's possibly the Great Game. This very beaten old term of Great Game, which it's attributed to the 19th century, the British and the Russian Great Game, before everybody else was also interested in the region, which became fashionable, the term became fashionable after independence, when not the British but the United States led the Western interest in Central Asia, and then Russia, obviously the sort of the incumbent major power, plus the rising China, which made it not a two-way Great Game but a three-way Great Game. And there's a lot of resentment against Great Game language in Central Asia because of, well, of very serious reasons. One being that the Great Game is played by 2 or 3 external players. Central Asia is the place, the chess play, the court where the game is played, as if it's Central Asian countries themselves have nothing to say, have nothing to decide. So that's been resented, but it continues to be applied very often in different languages, especially in journalistic coverage of Central Asia. But have the Central Asian countries themselves been so passive and not really doing anything? Well, one thing that you can generally describe that the Central Asian countries have been doing since independence has been trying to develop a variety of multivectoral foreign policies. So Central Asian multivectoralism is basically a 5-type variety of each country coming up with its own blend, its own brand of relating to multiple countries without over-relying on just one country. In 1991, having gained independence, all of them were primarily motivated by the wish to step away from Russia, because that was obviously the one country that they gained independence from. Right? But soon enough they realized, well, trying to walk away from Russia, they can walk into the embrace of China, which is also right there. You cannot move away from China. And then further down, especially when you talk about authoritarian, very self-serving regimes, then you also they realize that if you're too friendly with the West, they can be a very burdensome partnership as well, because they want human rights, they want democracy, they want nice elections. We don't want any of that, right? So multivectoralism was really the Central Asian way of balancing all of those relations. On one extreme, of course, Turkmenistan's multivectoralism, which is not called multivectoralism, it's called neutrality, basically closing the doors to everybody, more or less. Right? But both of these, Great Game from outside, multivectoralism from inside, hasn't really explained that much, or at least at this point in 21st century, especially what has already been highlighted by the Ukrainian-Russian civil war. Everything is changing, the rules of the game changing, the states are changing, and the Central Asian countries are finding the situation in a slightly different way. And I think, I wanted to argue, and that sort of goes Yashar's security complex, regional security complex thing, that Central Asian region has been undergoing a regionalization process. And when I say regionalization, I don't mean just this neutral process of becoming regional, but actually regionalization also in the sense of becoming a region itself. It was not a given that Central Asia is a region. Very often it was just random 5 countries which were quarreling with each other more often than being friends. Central Asia was viewed as a region from outside more often, and very often, especially when you look at this already aged book, Great Games Old and New, New and Old, by Alex Cooley. He has a whole chapter which says that Central Asia as a region is basically is a non-existent thing. It's a virtual concept. There's no regionness in the regionness of Central Asia. But I think that regionalization is happening. And the two things that are speaking to that process of regionalization, or indicating it, is on one hand, the externally promoted regionalization, which is the multiplicity of C5+1s. Kishore just mentioned that passingly, but I think that's a very interesting development. If anybody were watching it, Central Asians leaders have been invited at the highest level by around 10 countries. The United States, China, US made it very famous, but the original one apparently was Japan. Japan, and then Korea, and India, and Pakistan, United States, Germany, Europe, EU in general. Russia was one of the last to start its version of C5+1, and upcoming, I was told, there's going to be an Italian version of C5+1. So we have a whole bunch of countries trying to trying to show respect to Central Asia, the 5 of them together. President Rahman at one point was complaining, oh, don't look at us at 5 altogether, we are different countries, each of us are separate, but that was maybe, a complaint when he was not in the mood. But Central Asia gained a lot of importance, significance, recognition on the world stage as 5. The 5 countries that were getting all this attention. But in parallel to that, however, even more importantly, the C5 has been going on internally. There is the C5 that President Nazarbayev, late in his presidential career, announced, and President Mirziyoyev, early in his career, picked it up, and the first C5 gathering of more recent version took place in Astana. It was happening, the 5 of them never met actually. Even in the early 90s, it was always either Turkmenistan was falling off or Tajikistan was falling off at some point. But C5, the 5 countries themselves together have been meeting a lot. And that is something that a lot of people complain about, that it's just 5 presidents meet once a year, every year, but nothing else happened. But actually, lots of things are happening. Many things are happening that are slightly beyond the radar, not so topical, not so important, interesting for journalists, but a lot of things are happening. We are getting a greater sense of Central Asia being a real region. And to the point that some people say, oh, look at Turkmenistan, it only attends the summits, but nothing else. Well, Turkmenistan does participate in many other areas rather than just the summits, including especially the energy sector. But regionalization never needs to be all at once. 5 countries doesn't mean all of them immediately in the same pace should be joining together. 4 countries is all right. In fact, regionally in the post-independence period, the 3 of them were usually the enthusiasts for regionalization, which is Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan. Tajikistan typically joins a bit later. This time Turkmenistan has also been part of it. So I think this new regionalization process is something that needs to be watched. And when this happens, and when you look at regionalization process happening, then I think we can look at this concept, this quick short-term of great game in a slightly different manner. Then the great game is becoming more actual. There is an actualization process of the great game where Central Asian countries themselves are also actors. They're also choosing not just a place where things happen, but also actors that get to choose and contribute to the process of the game. And why that is happening is because in the light, especially of the war in Ukraine, it's a tectonic shift actually, just to generally remark. The Ukraine war is not just about Ukraine, it is indeed shaping up a very different way of how international relations might be working in the nearest future. And Central Asia as a region became more needed, especially needed by Russia. But the more it is needed by Russia, the more interesting it becomes for the West because of the need to counterbalance. And the more Russia becomes closed off, Central Asia becomes the more interesting for China, etc. So in a process of domino effects in a way, Central Asia has been becoming the site and the place of a very new, interesting way of a great game. And that is something that I think regional security complex that Yashar started to advertise at the end of his, as a way of his presentation, I think was very nice. Except that, I don't know, with the securitization theory, that school, I always consider, feel like it is too limiting us to the concept of security. Why not something else? And is it all about security? Is international relations all just about security? What about opportunities? What about cooperation? What about, I don't know, etc. So when you look at it slightly broader, that for example, a regional, not just security complex, but many other complex, then I think it becomes especially more appealing. But of course, then a theory of everything. There's a movie which I still need to watch, A Theory of Everything, but theories can only explain, when they're good, they can only explain very little. So hopefully this process of looking and for new ways of looking at Central Asia will keep going on, and hopefully also about Balkans. What I listening to in the morning also to the Balkan, the remarks about Balkans, and now to the presentation, I feel like there's a very interesting, promising comparative study between Central Asia as a region and the Balkans as a region. And I already see one very important difference, which is the Central Asian countries don't have these systemic, deep-rooted conflicts that separate them. Whereas in the Balkans, one thing that unites them are their mutual conflicts. The mutual claims to each other is one way to define what the Balkans as a region is. And that seems to be a very interesting way in which these two regions might be comparing. And your presentation was really good, but if potentially when you're developing, I think it would be very nice, it was asking for a nice table, just a chart of these multiple themes that you wanted to pursue, and maybe countries of the Balkans, and next to each, what was happening in a way that would visualize very well how different countries are comparing to each other in terms of these post-Ukrainian war challenges. That's it from me. Thank you.